Welcome to the Media Roundtable. We're talking to leading podcasters about the shows they create, why they create them, and the impact that they have on the world. So whether you're a listener or a member of the advertising community, you can get a better understanding of the content that's out there and feel good about what you consume and what you support. I'm your host, Dan Granger, and today we are joined by the hosts of the acclaimed podcast, Were You Raised by Wolves? And the show is a delightful podcast about etiquette, manners, and beyond. The perfect odd couple, Leah and Nick, try to make the world a nicer, more polite place and offer up practical advice to help you smoothly glide through any situation. And they'd send you a handwritten thank you note if they could, apparently. That's really true. Seems to be a recurring theme. It really seems like that's true. Now, we do have to have a discussion about why can't you, if I'm honest. That's really my big question is why
he does.
You send a handwritten?
He does.
Oh, you do?
Well,
really?
The problem
is... He's saying if he has your address, if he had your address, he'd send it.
I mean, the problem is...
You got to get in your database.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If I have your address after our chat today, you will absolutely get a handwritten note in the mail.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
no, I've actually, to listeners, I probably send thousands. I mean, I would have to count. Yeah, I really do. Yeah. Not only is it polite, but it's also really effective, inexpensive marketing.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I have a discipline, and we do this at the agency. We've done it since inception, where around Thanksgiving, we send like thousands of cards cumulatively, and you're not allowed to like phone it in or do like have a great year, looking forward to 2022. Like, it's got to be thoughtful, intentional, that you could only send to that person. And I end up doing hundreds of these things, but like it starts to become tyranny after a while, like mentally, physically, everything. So what we've found is we have found programs that allow you to actually type in your handwriting. Mm-hmm. And I've been cheating in that way. And it really, I think it saved me a lot of time. Does that still fit? Is that still polite?
Well, I think
is it not the same value? Have I really degraded
etiquette is a spectrum. It's a spectrum. Uh-huh. I mean, if given the choice between doing nothing and sending these sort of electronic handwriting sort of cards, I'll take that. Mm-hmm. But I think if the idea of handwritten correspondence is that you took the time to put the time in, and the time itself is actually part of the je ne sais quoi of the handwritten note, well, then, you're missing a little bit of the spirit of the handwritten note. So if you could, I would prefer a handwritten note. It is not as impactful as it could be.
Mm-hmm. So, it is. How many by what percent would you discount it if you received a note and you realized, it's their handwriting and they did think about it, but it's not really their handwriting? How much do you take it down?
I would go a good 35%. Sure.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
But I would appreciate the gesture. I would understand that you have many clients. And so I get it. I mean, I think we don't want to be using sort of these systems for condolence cards or, things where a little more gravity is required.
Yes. Very thoughtful. I think you guys are in the right business. Okay, so rather than me reading bios from websites, can I get just a little bit of background from each of you about, who you are and how you got into this? And Leah, if we can start with you, I'd love to hear from hear a little bit about you.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thank you for having us. And a little about me, I am originally from Maine, Northwestern Maine, and then I moved to New York City, doing stand-up comedy for the past over a decade, and moved to Los Angeles within the past 6 months. So I'm a whole new lady now. I've been eating vegan cheese and going on hikes. And
that's correct.
I'm loving it. I'm still very uptight and stressed out, but hopefully that'll slowly seep out of me.
You've maintained the New York state of mind since you've been here, and hopefully you've treated to our new breed of mosquitoes. Hopefully you've not encountered those yet, because they're ruining all outside.
Being from Maine, there's I'm full. I have
You're a veteran.
experience.
You're a grizzled veteran.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Grizzled is the correct term.
These are there's like a new strand though, and they're like 10 times more potent than the regular mosquito. It's making it hard for anyone to wear shorts in some instances. But thank you for that background, and welcome to Los Angeles. We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
Need the help. Yeah. First person I've talked to that moved here rather than away from here in some time.
That's what the moving company said to me. They were like, you're the only person going in that direction.
Yeah, there's 1,000 people going one way and you got the other side to yourself. Nick, tell me about you. You're a journalist.
Yes. Well, I have Emmys, journalist. I did a lot of red carpet event coverage, morning show stuff. Is it a journalist when you're interviewing a penguin and Alec Baldwin in the same episode? Maybe. I don't know.
If they give you one of those trophies, I think it counts. I think so.
But yes,
absolutely.
I'll take them. Sure. So I actually am from California originally myself. I'm from San Francisco, but I've been in New York for a zillion years. And I did work in local TV for many years for a network called Plum, which was sort of closed circuit television for rich people. It was channels in Aspen and Nantucket, the Hamptons and Palm Beach. Yeah. So it was definitely very exclusive resort markets. And so I was in the Hamptons market, so anchoring the live morning show and doing all of their charity event coverage and all sorts of fun stuff. So that was a wild time. And then cut to sort of more recent years, I wanted to do something sort of fun in the podcast space. In sort of a reaction to sort of what was happening in just the tone. There was a tone, you may recall, of recent years. There was sort of...
Was? Are we past that time?
Was, air quotes. Air quotes.
And it was sort of feeling like, it would be nice to do something about it. Like, what can I as one individual person do? But I was thinking like, etiquette and manners. I mean, I've always sort of been interested in the history of it and how culturally and sociologically. And Leah Bonnema has a great reputation for being just one of the nicest people in general. I mean, it's really true. At least people I know, which I don't know what that says about all the other people I know. It's grading on a curve, maybe. But she's definitely at the top of the list of people I know. And I met her through a mutual friend in New York. And obviously her reputation preceded her anyway. And I asked her, like, Leah, I have this idea to maybe do a podcast about manners and etiquette. And I'm not quite sure what it's going to be. I'm not sure if anybody's interested in this. I'm not sure if anybody's interested in hearing from us about this, but I thought, would you want to try and see what happens? And she was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, that was easy. Now I have to actually figure out what the show is. And so that's how we started.
And so what do you have like a North Star mission for Were You Raised by Wolves? And should people think about it as a show, or is it broader than that?
Well, Leah, why don't you address the North Star?
Well, I mean, is it a show or is it a state of being? I think that's the question. Movement? And I would say it's a state of being. I think our broader concept is very much, being kind to people and how to make people feel to respect people's boundaries and to also respect your boundaries politely. And we're very into making everybody feel included. And I think a lot of our podcast is very much our relationship with our audience. Like, we get so many questions. We call them questions from the wilderness. And then we try our best to answer them. And so it's this sort of like growing community of people who want to become aware of kindness.
So, I heard a quote yesterday, somebody saying, the world you live in is the world you were born into is not the world you're living in now. And I think those of us of a certain age are feeling that more than ever, right? Like, this is not where we started. How has etiquette evolved in your lifetime? How have the rules changed?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think one way to answer that is, what is etiquette? And how does etiquette differ from manners? And so I think to answer your question, let's start there. For me, and I think I take the Miss Manners sort of definition. She's sort of my spirit guide when it comes to manners. I'm most aligned with Judith Martin, I think. Okay. And I think if you asked her, she would say, and I'll agree with her, that manners are universal. Manners are timeless. They transcend society and culture. They transcend everything. Manners 1,000 years ago, manners today, it's the same. Etiquette, that is what is expressed by society. That is how manners are sort of manifesting. And that changes through time, through space, through culture, through community. So a good example would be like driving. Manners, we would all agree, it's good manners to not kill people while you're driving your car. Like, let's as a baseline, let's agree.
Yeah, I would agree.
The etiquette for how we achieve that in North America, we drive on the right side of the road. That's the etiquette. It's random. It's not required by our DNA. But as a society, we agree that we're going to drive on the right. We will kill fewer people this way. Australia, same manners. Let's not kill people. But our etiquette is going to be drive on the left. And so that's one example of how etiquette sort of manifests differently for the same principle. So I think manners have not changed at all. Even with technology changing, like to call someone fat in a telegram was rude. To call someone fat on TikTok, also rude. So, you know, still rude. Just because things may evolve and technology changes, the manners are the same.
Okay. All right. Understood. And so do you think about how much time you spend on manners versus etiquette?
I mean, for me personally, I spent a lot of time on all of this.
But I mean, in terms of the show, I mean, describing it to people that haven't had a chance to listen yet.
Sure.
I'd love for people to get a sense of, you know, what the focus is. And, you know, people may not understand that, you know, there's a lot of answering listener questions versus like a guest versus a chat show. You know, talk a little bit about, you know, what you're doing with the time.
So our show actually does cover sort of various facets. So we always start with this thing we call the amuse-bouche. And what this is actual and etiquette sort of rule. Could be fussy, could be arbitrary, but it's a rule in the world. And these are things that only I know about. Leah does not know what they are until she hears them live on air in front of everybody, which is fun for me. I don't know how Leah feels about
it. Well, I obviously came into this being, you know, I'm more etiquette like as in how we behave. A lot of my comedy is sort of like, why did this happen? Why do we do this? So I'm very excited to learn about whatever the etiquette that Nick presents, because chances are I don't know it and I've been doing it wrong my whole life. And so it's always a treat, and they're always fun. They're like, a lot of them are very historical.
Yeah,
I love it.
And that's really the most etiquette-y that we really get, those sort of fussy what fork to use rules, because, you know, those matter, but really what etiquette is about is just being mindful that other people in the world exist. And so most of the show is really focusing on that and encouraging our audience just to be more mindful of people around them. And through all the listener questions that we get and through sort of the only anecdotes from our life, everything really serves that purpose, which is just sort of like, this is universal. This is like all of us can relate to these etiquette crimes happening. And these are ways all of us can think about interactions differently in the future to sort of lower the temperature.
And so when you think about the ways that you get that you come up with your answers about different issues and your advice, how much of it is from like research of this is the textbook way to address this versus, you know, some sort of training or just using your judgment?
Nick and I we don't talk about the questions beforehand. So the amuse-bouche is first, and then we do a deep dive, which is we take a topic like email greetings or email signatures or
going through a drive-through.
Going through a drive-through, like ghosting, all of these. And then we talk about that. And then Nick and I don't discuss it beforehand. We think about it ourselves, and then we come together and we actually try to work through the answer together, like bringing both of our different points of view. And Nick also often brings research. I often bring life experience of doing it incorrectly. And then we work towards what we think sounds to be the most right. And then often our audience will respond to us and be like, oh, that was so great. Or, you know what I think? And so it sort of opens it up as a dialogue.
Because unless it's a rule about what fork to use for caviar, Although caviar forks, I don't know what that is. But unless it's something very fussy, there aren't hard and fast rules. It's you have to kind of go back to those principles of mindfulness. What shows the greatest consideration? So, that's what we're trying to sort of troubleshoot. Is they're like, okay, what is the etiquette crime here? Why does it feel rude? And what is the right etiquette response, knowing the broader principles? Because, you can look to Emily Post, you can look to Amy Vanderbilt, and these are just people who have their own ideas. But, what are the principles and how do we get back to that? And that's kind of what we try and focus on.
And it's also
it's like formula.
Sorry.
No, it's no problem. It's always harder when there's three. The thing that I like, it seems like you guys have really nailed the idea of like, you kind of have a bit of a foil relationship with each other. You come from a different perspective, but also, you make it funny and like a spoonful of sugar, right? Like this is not, most people don't want to sit and be told and instructed and like corrected on things that they're doing wrong. Like we're not in that type of society anymore. We like tell us that we're right and give us what we want right now. And so I think you guys, what you've done as an outsider listening in, I think you've done an incredible job making it fun to receive this information, because it could be all didactic all the time and people don't want to be preached at, right? So you've really had to, I think, do something that is more complex than it might appear.
Oh, thank you. I also think like a lot of people want to know what to do in certain situations. Like I get anxious when I haven't done something and I don't know what to do. Like a very simple one is, how long do you have to leave people's clothes in the dryer? We all want to know, how long do we have to leave it before we can take it out? So there is also that side of it where it's like with things where there isn't a hard and fast rule. We feel like there's actually some kind of tradition that we don't know about, so we try to work through that to give people, like for somebody like me, and through our letters, we've realized how many people feel anxious that they're doing the wrong thing and they do want to do the right thing. So we try to work through those more. Is it complex? How long to leave clothes in the dryer? I don't know. But those kind of everyday things where we don't know what we're supposed to be doing.
All right. Now, you guys are teasing a lot of really fascinating topics, and I'd love it if we could get some free samples from you here. So, for example, like you were talking about drive-through etiquette. How does that work? Are you not supposed to sound really angry at the person you're ordering from, or no?
Well, that's sure. Well, drive-through etiquette, I grew up in sort of Northern California where I don't really have a lot of experience with drive-throughs. And then now I live in New York City. I think we used to have a drive-through McDonald's in Midtown, but that's long gone. So I don't have a lot of personal experience. But there was a story where there's like a double lane drive-through that apparently exists in the world, where there's actually like two separate lanes that merge at the window. And this apparently didn't go well once, and somebody busted out an AK-47. And it was a scene at the drive-through. And just for the record, showing AK-47 is considered poor manners. So
is that poor manners?
I think that's
frowned upon, as I understand it.
Very rude.
I would rather you didn't. Correct. So certainly, how to merge. That's definitely a conversation. But also, one of the questions that we've gotten quite a few times is, how large an order can you place at the drive-through? What's the limit before you really just got to park and go in? And so I'm doing an order for the entire soccer team. Can I place an order for 30 people at the drive-through? Yeah, I personally think that's pushing it.
We had some debate on that one. And I think we came down to how complicated the order was. I think that's what we ended up coming down on. Like if you just had 30 burgers, fine. But if you have like 2 burgers, no onions, 1 burger, then park it and walk inside.
Yeah.
Well, we do have proxies in the grocery business, and that they kind of figured out you can have the 12 items or less sign, and that solves a multitude of problems, right?
Yes.
So you probably have to look at proxies of other industries when there's no clear-cut rule. So now, Nick, you, by the way, I do want to hear more samples, but I saw in your bio this something about you being raised on a hippie commune. Is that a joke, or is there any truth to that?
No, it's very true. Yeah. So, okay. So what's, I think, sort of hidden, embedded in Were You Raised by Wolves is actually this Buddhist idea of compassion and empathy, which I grew up with. I mean, Buddhism, one of the kind of cores is about mindfulness and empathy and compassion. And so definitely I kind of go through life with that in mind. I don't always succeed. I'll be the first to admit it. But I try. And that's all you can do. And so etiquette and manners is really kind of about that. The principles of just being mindful of other people, that they exist. And so, yeah, I kind of grew up in that type of household. I also grew up in a household with a lot of different people from different cultural backgrounds. I mean, we had Jains, we had Tibetan monks, we had bishops. So we just had all these religious sects coming through, and people from all over the world using it as a crash pad in the United States. For whatever reason, a lot of my parents' friends, coming back from Asia would land, or if they were heading to Asia, so it was just like the UN. And so through that, I actually got a lot of experience just seeing how other cultures do certain things, which is etiquette. And I always found that very fascinating to see just different approaches to the same manners. And so I've always sort of been interested in that. And in my own travels, I'm always sort of interested when I travel to have trips for that express purpose. I mean, a lot of my own just personal vacations are to places to experience a culture and an etiquette and manners that are just feel differently than my own experience, which I find fun. Life is all about a contrast. And then, of course, now I'm in New York City, and I was, wearing grosgrain ribbon and boat shoes in the Hamptons. So I did let the pendulum swing very far in the other direction. But we've swung back.
It's interesting, though, to think about, if during your formative years, you're having to negotiate and navigate so many different cultures and sensitivities and preferences. I would imagine that got you on a track to be really well qualified for this type of work. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a bunch of people all in sharing space, trying to live, that's not an easy thing to navigate. And so this stuff becomes, I think, amplified in its importance. No?
Oh, sure. Yes. I mean, I think if I have expertise, it's in just being curious and open-minded to just how, how the world can be. But also, living in New York City, we're on top of each other, so there's also just the survival required to live in Manhattan, which is a real thing. So etiquette, I mean, everything in New York City, everything is just a little heightened and magnified and amplified. And so, too, are the etiquette highs and lows. So it's, definitely been a crash course having been here for a while.
And when I listen to the show, you guys have really good chemistry. Do either of you have any improv training, or is that something that happened organically? How much of that is it just happens versus prep?
I think it just happens in our... I mean, I'm a stand-up, so, I mean, when you're on stage, you often have to do a lot of improv with the audience. But Nick and I think our relationship, I mean, we don't prep it. So it's just sort of how we've grown together.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I've done live television, live at 7 a.m. when you're sleep deprived, trying to do an interview with a celebrity. So that definitely... hone some type of skill, being able to do that. But also what's clever about the show and how it's designed is we designed it. We made it. It's bespoke to us and our talents. There's not a portion of the show where we sing, it's designed to highlight what we're good at. So every
okay, you say you don't sing, but who did the opening song? Whose voice is that? And is that how in the world?
Yeah, amazing composer and musician, Rob Parabonian in Brooklyn. I asked him to help create this for me. And so that is actually him and one of his friends doing it for us. So it is not us, contrary to popular belief.
Well, it's cool because most of us, I think, really struggle to find, we're in this weird... not quite fully developed industry where they haven't sorted out licensing rights. So you can't just play whatever you want. And you're always stuck trying to pick between a bunch of things that you can license for $6 a month. And to have something custom is pretty cool.
Oh, I'm all that custom.
And it's a decent jingle.
Thank you.
I think it's very impressive. Who knows? Maybe it'll be like Folgers and they'll be bidding on it in 30 years.
We should be so lucky. Yeah.
People start using it as ringtones.
Yeah.
We actually do have listeners who did ask for the file to use as ringtone. So there are a couple cell phones in the world buzzing with that theme song currently.
Love it. I love it.
You mentioned something earlier that I've heard throughout the show that seems like a really important principle, which is like boundaries, right? And I hear you guys doing a lot of that, and I don't think people talk a lot about boundaries or enough about it, but it's kind of the secret to like everything with people, I think. Can you say a little bit more about how boundaries plays a part in what you guys are doing?
In general, in etiquette. Oh yeah, go ahead, Leah.
Oh. No, go ahead.
Well, in general. No, you go.
No, you go.
Look at how polite. Okay. All right. Well, obviously, we have people that are very concerned with being polite here. I'm going to call on Nick.
Okay.
There you go.
In general, there is, some people do feel like you can't be polite and direct and set boundaries at the same time, but that is incorrect. Mm-hmm. It is entirely possible to be totally polite and be direct and set boundaries. This is all compatible, all totally possible. So, and very often setting boundaries actually is the polite response. To not set the boundary is actually, at the end of the day, rude and not productive.
Leah, anything you want to contribute on that one?
Yeah, it's been so, I feel like it's been a real journey with this. I feel like in the beginning, when we work through ways to handle questions, we always end up coming down on the best way to handle something is to be honest, but to be polite about it, like with a neutral tone, like you're not judging, it doesn't work for you. And you need to be able to tell people that in a way that there's no judgment. And I think that it's really been, I get a lot of DMs about it from our listeners. And I know actually for me, it's been very, like the way I've been able to say no from the beginning of this podcast to up till now has very much changed. Like at the beginning, I would feel anxious. I'd be like, what reasons can I come up with? And now the more we talk about it, and I know that if on my end, I would rather somebody was just honest with me so I could then either fix what I did or know what they wanted to do. So then now that we've talked about it so much, you realize, I'll just put that into practice. I don't have to be available for everything. That doesn't make me impolite. And we just have discussed we call them back pocket phrases. Like if it's something that you get nervous about saying to people, you practice them, you have them ready for different circumstances. And I think this is one of the most, I've seen a difference even in my life. I'll even call Nick and I'll be like, you won't even believe this email that I just sent. It's very direct. I didn't even beat around the bush. I didn't even apologize. I just said, so I think that's, it's a very interesting thing to discuss. And I personally find it helpful. And I know a lot of our listeners have too, finding this ground where you can take care of your own needs and still feel like you're being respectful of the person asking you. And when it's okay to be like, that's too far, I'm removing myself from the situation because it's unhealthy. And that's a different thing.
I wish that boundaries was like a required class for, all students before they graduate or something. Cause my experience is, and I've read a lot about it. It's something I try to practice. But people's natural reaction is like, if somebody is asking something that you want to say no to, people feel they get so afraid. And so they either just acquiesce and then resent and do a thing that they're not comfortable doing. And then all of a sudden they're mad and you don't know why till they explode. Or it's like they snap. It's like like you said, Leah, it's that judgment. And people have a very hard time saying, no, I actually am going to require this, or I am not going to choose to participate in this. And to say that in a way that isn't reactive, defensive, like shaming when you say it, really, really hard. It's like an art that nobody knows about. So anyway,
I feel like we practice it a lot. I feel like we practice it a lot on Were You Raised by Wolves?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
and I think we demonstrate, one of the things that I want to do with the show is give people the tools that they need to solve their own etiquette problems, because we can't cover every variation on somebody slipping into your DMs. We can't do every unique situation. And one of the things that's happened with the show going on is that the questions get more and more bonkers. We were like, how is this happening in the world? How is this thing happening in the world? How did this person do this for your party? So by giving people the tools to solve their own etiquette problems, we hope that we'll be able to, cover a lot of those bases, and you won't need us for every individual sort of micro bonkers scenario. And there'll be some more universal tool you'll have. And definitely boundary setting is, I think it's top three for just how to survive in the world.
It's enormous. Well, I love that you guys are covering it.
But also with so many other things in etiquette is about relationships. So it does require two people. So when you set a boundary, the other person needs to respect that boundary. And if somebody says, oh, unfortunately, I can't do this thing that you've asked me to do, you need to respect that. And that's the other side of etiquette, which also is required to make this successful.
Yes. All right, so tell me if you've ever heard of any of these companies. Indeed, Shopify, NetSuite, Headspace, Quip, Theragun, Postmates. I'm not only the host of the Media Roundtable, but also CEO of a company called Oxford Road, and we are the world's leading independently owned and operated audio ad agency. And what that means is that we help great companies, many that you have probably heard of on some of the other podcasts that you listen to. We help them test and scale campaigns in audio channels, with podcast being one of those leading channels. Some of the work that we do includes media planning and buying, as well as analytics, attribution, and insights. And we also have a very special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. We have our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. If you're looking to be involved in audio and you want a partner that can help work with you to make sure that you achieve unprecedented ROI and massive scale, you should get in touch with us at Oxford Road. And by the way, the only reason that we're able to do the work of the Media Roundtable is because we have a great team at Oxford Road that supports us and makes it possible. So, what we're doing is not just a podcast, but we're really trying to help brands live out their values and balance that with their business objectives, which is an increasingly hard thing to do in this world of misinformation and malice that's infecting so much of our media. But at Oxford Road, we don't want to just broker this stuff. We want to impact the industry for good. We want to raise the bar on what gets created. And Oxford Road is helping make that possible through the Media Roundtable. So if you're somebody that's interested in working with an ad agency or a partner on this type of work for your advertising campaigns, go to oxfordroad.com. It's easy to spell. And get in touch with us, or at least just sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer. That's oxfordroad.com. Okay, so let's talk more about from the perspective of somebody that might want to sponsor. What can you tell us about who your audience is? Like, do you have like an archetype in your mind, or is it have you found any common denominators across most of your listeners?
We have a very broad audience.
It's remarkable. Okay. Yeah. Because who among us has not experienced an etiquette crime? I mean, it's so universal. If you've left the house ever, you have experienced somebody being rude to you. So, this is really transcends, So our audience, and so we get tons of letters and physical letters in the mail, also just people taking the time to actually write cards to us. And it really has run the gamut from grandmothers, conservative grandmothers in Tallahassee, to non-binary chefs in Seattle, to people living in the rural North Dakota, cattle ranchers, a lot of international listeners. And so it just, everybody has a slightly different lens, with they kind of approach the things we talk about. Some people are like, oh, I love just hearing about your life in the coasts. Some people are like, oh, that all happened to me. And, and everything in between. I don't think we can really put a pinpoint on demographics necessarily. It's felt pretty broad.
We also have people who listen with their kids.
Oh,
no, we have a lot of people that listen with their children because we're family friendly. And then they talk to us. They'll send us letters about how they listen with their kids. We've gotten videos of people's kids.
Yes.
Really?
And then we definitely have, it's very across the age. I would say more than 50% women. Would you say that, Nick?
I think it probably skews 55, 45 women. And I think we did get some sort of demographic data from Chartable that indicated we skew sort of graduate school and postdoctorate. So we're sort of heavily weighted a little bit on the education scale.
People. Yep.
And we definitely skew a little higher income. I think the peaks was sort of at 250,000, 100,000 sort of annual income, household income. So I think we're kind of skewing a little there, but I mean, I think in terms of who we hear from, it really does feel pretty broad. And it's always fun when somebody like DMs us on Instagram to look at their bio and see where they are in the world and sort of like try and imagine what their life is like. It's like, oh, she just got married, so maybe that's why she is interested. Or like, oh, it looks like she just had a baby. Or like, oh, it looks like a new job. So I'm sure there's somebody microwaving tuna in the office. So, but yeah, I think whoever they are, we have found that the connection with us is very strong. I mean, I feel like if you take the time, I mean, I'll just show you this. This is from this week at our PO Box.
Okay, and what he's showing, because we don't have video, for those at home, he's holding up a big stack of mail. Yeah.
So Fullerton, California, Deming, New Mexico. We got Austin, Texas. We have Toronto, Canada. So
these are like real places.
These are real places. Real people.
Yes.
Real people in real places. And you guys, I'm going to be honest with you.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'll say this now because I know the answer. I wasn't going to ask, but I'm listening. I'm going, did they make all this up? Where do they pull these questions from? You know, how do you get this quality of question, this range of topics? And it sounds like this is all legit. Like you don't even have to ask them.
We have incredible listeners. We have incredible listeners. I think they also, besides wanting to work through problems, a lot of times people message us because they want to feel validated because they don't have anybody in their life to say, yes, these people were rude to you. And Nick and I are there to show up and be like, ugh, so rude. That's what we do for people. That's the gift we have to offer.
But also,
so you get to like settle disputes and like and be the arbiter of is something actually rude or not. They get the validation.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we get to say you were wrong. You were wrong. It's always our listeners who are like super polite and trying to do these amazing things. And then they're like, did I do something wrong? And it's like, no, you were wrong. You're perfect.
Yeah, so often with these etiquette crimes, when you're the victim, the perpetrator makes you feel like you did something wrong. This is very common. And we want to just remind everybody, no, you did not do anything wrong. You're the victim here. You are fine. They're a bad person.
Okay, so how have you built the audience? Because that's not easy to do. I mean, you guys are like 100 episodes. You just passed the 100 episode mark, correct?
Yeah, I think we're 110, 111. Yeah.
And congratulations. And did I hear that you have not taken a week off? You have not taken 1 week?
No.
Nope.
Okay. All right. And
we will not rest until society is saved. We got a lot of etiquette
world peace. He wants world peace. That's the goal.
Good. Well, incidentally, we have Meta World Peace coming up in a few weeks, and I'm sure we'll be having similar discussions about etiquette as well. But okay, so you guys do this every week, nonstop. You don't take holidays off. You don't take vacations on this. You just keep going. And so what have you done to get this into people's ears? Like, how do you promote? Because I think that's like everybody's problem.
I mean, I guess overall, before we started, my attitude was, I think if we make the show good, we'll find an audience. So I've always believed in that it's just quality first, and eventually we will find the people who will like us and will want to stick with us. So I think that's sort of been our baseline strategy from the beginning.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think it's gotten so crowded now that I think most of us, if we wanted to, we could do nothing but listen to podcasts one at a time and if we took the time to find the good ones, you'd never run out of good stuff to listen to. So it's really, really hard. And, it's interesting. We had somebody who's had some real hit shows under their belt a few weeks ago. And he was saying basically like the industry has evolved to a place where it's very hard to do. If you build it, they will come. And that a good product is not enough to attract an audience in most cases. But if you've been able to find an exception to that, that's great. So you just do it and it spreads organically, but you don't have like a promotional strategy that you use.
We do. That's just the first plank. Yes. Oh, no.
This is a multi-pronged strategy.
Oh, of course.
On to other prongs. Okay.
But as a baseline, it's really hard to promote something that's not good. And whether our show is good or not, who could say? I believe in it. I work very hard, so it's as good as I can make it, at least. So we believe in it, and we think it's fun. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of finding an audience, I think I come from the world of television and television production. And actually, the show is really constructed almost like a TV episode in how it's sort of structured. And also our energy is a little more TV than it is podcast. Mm-hmm. And so, it's coming from that angle. And because of that, it is important to have a consistent sort of vibe and brand of what to expect if you join us. So from the beginning, I also wanted to make sure that we had a very consistent brand identity. So the sound, the theme song, the music throughout, that all feels like it's of a world. Our graphic design is very bold and specific, and it's definitely like, oh, that's part of the world. Leah and I's chemistry and vibe, it feels, like, okay, I also get what that is. Our structure is pretty consistent. And so I think our audience likes that consistency, that they know what to expect when they find us, and they know if they recommend us to somebody else, that they'll also get that. Like, we're family friendly. We don't use bad language. We don't talk about super adult topics. You won't be worried if you're in the car with your grandmother or your kids. And the consistency is also that. You don't have to worry that like there's going to be a very like Wolves After Dark episode unexpectedly that you didn't know was coming and that things are going to get a little blue. Like, what you're going to get with us. And I think people find that comforting. And that comfort, I think, has helped build our audience.
Well, and that's music to an advertiser's ears, everything that you're saying. And it's, it's so hard to not have, we don't have rating systems. We don't, at least at this stage, right? There's really not a lot of third-party accountability or standards so that people can know that you have content that they can trust, that they're not going to find, outrage on Twitter with their brand if they sponsor it, right? So let's move into the advertising piece a little deeper. Can you talk about how it functions as a business? Are you ad supported, Patreon supported, all of the above? Like, what does the business look like?
Leah, why don't you start with our Patreon?
We have a Patreon that seems to be on the uptick currently. And, we definitely have at the base of this podcast, which I think we both said, but just to reiterate, is the faithfulness of our listeners and our relationship with them. And many of them are on our Patreon. We have messages, we post videos, and our Patreon is Nick and I answer questions we get like about our personal taste. I recently adopted a new dog. We're doing a lot of dog content. Nick and I talk a lot about, TV programming on there. You know what I mean? It's more of like a personal. So we have that relationship. So we have a Patreon that I very much enjoy, and we call them our Patreon family. And then we also have ads.
And we have two different types of ads. We have our host read. And then we do some target advertising. For our audience, we would prefer to do exclusively host read. But until we get more host read opportunities, we do sort of fill in some of our catalog with the targeted.
Well, I'm hopeful that this conversation helps with some of those host read relationships. Can you talk about what types of businesses might be the best fit to partner with you guys? Who do you want? Like, what are the types of brands that you want to be working with, and who do you think you'd be most effective for?
I always say this, and I'm just throwing this out there constantly. Dollywood, but because she Hollywood is the epitome of, she's kind, she is supportive of people. I'm just going to put that. I randomly like to say Dolly Parton throughout the day just to manifest that. But besides that,
yeah. That's a good one. I mean, it's a competitive category, but I'm sure we can find you somebody in the Dolly Parton ad vertical. But besides that,
I think advertisers that share our values is always important because what we also don't want is that you're cooking along in our episode and you get to our mid-roll ad break and then something feels very jarring.
Yeah.
Like we've had advertisers that are totally aligned with our values, great advertisers, but the quality of their targeted ad was like not great. And they're like, I don't want that listener experience. And so it's like, that's not a good fit. And our hosts, right, are seamlessly integrated into our show, even though we use digital insertion, like it's so seamless, you don't know it. And so we want it as seamless and as smooth for our listeners as possible. And so that's something to note, I guess. But,
well, and do you make sure that you actually can stand behind the product and have a personal experience with it?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. We would never advertise something that we didn't actually think was something that we would believe in. Yeah. I mean, our credibility is at stake and we're not interested in squandering that.
And I think we also, we don't want to advertise certain things around certain behaviors because I think so much of our listener experience is meant to be a feel-good experience, even though it's talking about things that are maybe anxiety producing. So we've stayed away from any kind of vices like gambling, maybe hard liquor. We haven't used as advertising. And also we don't want to have any advertising that makes people feel unattractive.
Yeah.
So like, oh, is your hair thinning? It's like, oh, we don't want that.
We don't want people to feel bad. We want them to feel good about themselves.
So how much of that is about category and how much of that is about just collaborating to make sure the copy is set in a way that aligns with your approach?
I think it's category first and then it's, then.
Got it. Okay. Well, I can just think now, we work with some companies like the Quip electric toothbrush or the Tushy bidet. Depending on...
We've talked about toilets.
Actually, I heard you talking about toilets, and you were talking about an expensive one, but none of...
Oh, yeah. Do you have Toto as an advertiser? I really want a Toto NX1
you want
toilet.
Tushy. You want Tushy. Tushy is...
it's a great word, Tushy.
It is a great word. And just make sure when you go that you go to hellotushy.com because there can be a lot of confusion there.
There's also Tushy, the
expectations.
ZZ Top song. Oh, that's Tush. That's Tush.
All right. Listen, I know we're coming out. We're running out of time here, so I want to get to some of the final questions. And if you don't mind, I want to get a little bit heavier in content because when you guys started, you started late 2019, and now it's late 2021, which is like a different planet. Than the one that you first broadcast to, right?
Yes.
And so, like, how has all of the craziness in the world impacted the show? Because I don't think I've heard you touch on, like, political topics and how to even navigate those types of situations.
I think for us, it's really important to make the show evergreen because so mmany of these topics are evergreen. And so we have sort of stayed away from anything that felt a little too of the moment of the zeitgeist. So yeah, certainly didn't necessarily need to touch on like a specific election or a specific global pandemic. But
there will be more. And
yeah, I heard Trump was a big listener to your show, actually.
That would be news.
Yeah.
That would be news to me.
We did do a Patreon episode on right at the beginning of the pandemic on like interacting with people, but it was on Patreon.
Yeah, I think our Patreon is very real time and more conversational, more biographical. Our show is much more evergreen. So we really try to keep the show sort of in that world. But we definitely talk about things like politics in general, like how to deal with the political conversation at Thanksgiving dinner. That's not of this moment. I think that will be a topic in the next 30 years. We're not going to be in a world in which that's not going to be a problem. So we definitely talk about these topics more generally. Absolutely.
I also think that back to you saying how the world has changed so much Nick was the last person I saw before we all went on lockdown in New York. We were at his apartment recording. We thought we'd bank a few. And then probably in 2 weeks, we'd all hang out. Obviously, that didn't happen. And then Nick, who's exceptional at making things happen and figuring things out, was like, he sent me a microphone and some sterile wipes which at the time were
like gold.
And we decided we would just record. And on a personal note, it really kept me, we were in a 400 square foot apartment for 3 months without leaving. And it was something we did every week, and we checked in and we recorded. And I know, at least from the messages that I got from our audience, that they felt the same way, that they were like hearing from us every week. And that, we also went with our audience in this. People wrote to us specifically saying how much they look forward to our show as a break, because we went with these evergreen topics, because we didn't change our mood, that it was sort of like a happy space once a week that they could check into on Mondays.
Well, and I think that's really valuable. One of the reasons we started doing this show, is because we found ourselves as brokers kind of sitting between programming that was feeding what we call the outrage industrial complex. There's a lot of people exploiting outrage and really kind of the opposite of civility, right? And I feel like it's reached there's been a crescendo even in the last couple of years since you've been doing this. So I just wonder, there's new stats out basically saying that over half of Trump voters and 41% of Biden voters believe that they would support a secession at this point. Like, polarization is off the rails right now. And I just wonder, is this not one effort of many that could help us be a little bit more civil in how we think about each other, a little bit more charitable? Is it possible that what you're doing could also be an answer to that type of problem that we're having as a society? That's our hope, at least.
We
Absolutely.
Hope so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think when you do that survey, and in the abstract, people may have these sort of very bold feelings. Mm-hmm. But I think when people are confronted with real people in front of them, it's different. It's a different relationship. It's similar to how people feel totally fine leaving nasty comments online, but probably wouldn't say that to your face, maybe.
Yeah.
So we just want to have that feeling that most people have with in-person reactions. We want to take that in all aspects of their life. So that if they respond to that survey, or if they're leaving a comment on the internet, that same mindfulness that might prevent them from saying something inappropriate in live situation, can we also have that in all aspects of your life? So I do think that with more mindfulness and more compassion for other people, because that's what that's about, us versus them, that's not having compassion for the other side or empathy, understanding where these other people are coming from. And also, when you think, we're really not that different, everybody. Come on. We all want the same things. We all want to have the best for our kids. We all want to have community. We all want to hang out with our friends. Like, we all want these same things across the country. Like, it's really not that different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we forget that, how universal just the human experience is. And I think we just need to be reminded of that. And I think the more we're reminded of that, I think that will change our behavior. And maybe that will kind of change the tone of what's happening out there.
What a beautiful way to end. Okay, so knowing that we're out of time, I just want to say I think this is, first of all, it's great to meet you both and to get to know you better. And I hope that we can spread the good news about what you guys are creating, because I really think it's you're fighting the good fight in a very interesting way that I think is very much aligned with what we're trying to do as an organization. And so thank you for that. If people want to get in touch with you or know what's coming next, where would you direct them? WarriorRaisedByWolves.com. Or if you have a question, you can leave us a voicemail or send us a text message, 267-CALL-RBW. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was a treat.
This show is dedicated to advancing our mission of mobilizing marketers to promote truth and civility in journalism. We value clarity, truth, fairness, respect, de-escalation, and tolerance, and we invite you to engage with us at MediaRoundtable.com. And if you found the show helpful and you're committed to our cause, please follow us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you like to listen. It's always free. And if you're a marketer looking to live this out, you can get in touch with us at Oxford Road, which is our advertising agency. Just visit oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. Special thanks to Bianca, Kyle, Jennifer, and the team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.